There was one distinct moment, though, when my brother was helping my dad up the back staircase, and he was carrying my dad's oxygen tank, and watching them both go up the back stairs. That moment for me was a release of...
For over 30 years, he was the face of wholesome, family television. With that warm smile and a twinkle in his eye, Michael Landon walked into millions of living rooms, first as the fiery little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza, then as the caring father Charles Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie, and finally as the angel Jonathan Smith on Highway to Heaven. To the world, he seemed like the perfect father and the ideal husband, a man who stood for the best American values: integrity, hard work, and family above all. For generations, his characters weren't just roles, they were a moral compass, a comforting voice in a complicated world. He was the guy who could solve any problem with a heart-to-heart in the barn or a knowing look that promised everything would be okay. For decades, that was the Michael Landon everyone knew and loved. We saw him raise his daughters on the prairie, fight for what was right on the Ponderosa, and guide lost souls back toward the light. It looked like his life was a perfect reflection of his art. But for his own daughters, the ones who knew him simply as Dad, there was another story. A much more complex, and sometimes painful, reality they've stayed quiet about for 34 years, until now. So what was really going on behind the scenes of this picture-perfect Hollywood life? 3 decades after we mourned a TV icon, his children are finally breaking their silence, and the truth is more shocking, heartbreaking, and human than any script he ever wrote. Before he was Michael Landon, he was Eugene Maurice Orowitz, born in Queens, New York, on Halloween in 1936. His path to stardom wasn't a fairy tale. It was a desperate escape from a childhood that was the total opposite of the idyllic families he'd later create on screen. His father was a publicist and his mother was a Broadway actress, but their home was a war zone of bitter fights and emotional chaos. Michael grew up under the shadow of his mother's mental instability, a darkness that would follow him for the rest of his life. He found his first escape not in acting, but in sports. In high school, he became a champion javelin thrower, and that skill earned him an athletic scholarship to the University of Southern California. It was his ticket out, a chance to build a new life far from the turmoil at home. But when a torn shoulder ligament ended his athletic dreams, he was lost. He started working odd jobs, from unloading freight cars to selling blankets. While working at a warehouse, an aspiring actor friend asked for help running lines for an audition at Warner Brothers. The casting director ended up being more impressed with Eugene than his friend. Just like that, he was in, and his friend was out. That day, Eugene Orowitz disappeared, and Michael Landon was born. His rise was steady. He started with small roles in TV westerns and B-movies, but it was the 1957 cult classic, I Was a Teenage Werewolf, that really put him on the map. The film was a surprise hit and made him a star. But his life, and the lives of television viewers everywhere, truly changed in 1959 when he was cast as Little Joe, the youngest and most hot-headed of the Cartwright brothers on NBC's Bonanza. The show was a phenomenon. For 14 years, Bonanza was a fixture in American homes, and Little Joe Cartwright became a household name. Audiences fell in love with his rebellious charm and the deep love he had for his family. But Michael Landon wasn't just an actor on the show, he was a creative force. He started writing and directing episodes, sharpening the skills that would define the rest of his career. He was learning how to tell stories that connected with people, stories about family, morality, and the power of love. When Bonanza ended, Landon was already searching for his next project. He found it in the beloved books by Laura Ingalls Wilder and transformed them into Little House on the Prairie. As Charles "Pa" Ingalls, Landon cemented his image as America's dad. He was wise, kind, and completely devoted to his wife, Caroline, and their kids. For 9 seasons, we all tuned in to watch the Ingalls family face the hardships of the frontier, their stories teaching us about faith, community, and resilience. Behind the scenes, Landon was in total control. He was the executive producer, a frequent director, and a key writer for the series. He poured everything he had into the show, shaping it into his vision of what a family should be. To his co-stars, especially the young actors playing his children, he was a mentor and a second father. Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura, often talked about their special bond, saying he was a father figure to her both on and off screen. After Little House, he didn't stop. He created, produced, and starred in Highway to Heaven, playing an angel sent to Earth to help people. The show was another huge success, blending humor, drama, and a spiritual message that his audience loved. It was the final piece of his public persona, Michael Landon, the man who didn't just play a good guy on screen but seemed to be one in real life. His legacy seemed set in stone, a beloved star who created shows that celebrated family, laughter, and love. On screen, Michael Landon's world was simple. His characters were devoted husbands and fathers whose commitment to family never wavered. But his own life was far more complicated, full of the human messiness he so carefully erased from his scripts. He was a man who desperately wanted the perfect family, yet his own life was a sprawling, blended, and often turbulent story of love, heartbreak, and scandal. Landon was married 3 times and had 9 children. His first marriage was to Dodie Levy-Fraser in 1956. He adopted her son, Mark, and they adopted another son, Josh, before divorcing in 1962. A year later, he married Marjorie Lynn No, an actress and dancer. This would be his longest marriage, lasting 19 years. He adopted Lynn's daughter, Cheryl, and together they had 4 more children. Leslie, Michael Jr., Shauna, and Christopher. To the world, the Landon clan looked like a real-life TV family. They lived in a huge Beverly Hills mansion, and photos from the time show a happy, sun-drenched California family. By all accounts, Landon was a doting father who loved having a full house. This was the image he projected, and the one the public adored. He was Pa Ingalls come to life, but that perfect picture was shattered in the early 1980s. While still married to Lynn, Landon began an affair with Cindy Clerico, a much younger makeup artist and stand-in on the Little House set. When the affair went public, it led to a messy and painful divorce from Lynn in 1982. The scandal was a huge blow to Landon's carefully built image. America's favorite family man was leaving his wife of nearly 2 decades for a woman half his age. The tabloids went wild. Landon, always trying to control his own story, gave interviews defending his actions, but the damage was done. The divorce wasn't just a rift between him and Lynn, it was a trauma for their children, who were caught in the middle. His son, Michael Jr., later directed a movie called Michael Landon, The Father I Knew, which explored the pain he and his siblings felt during their parents' divorce. It showed a period of immense hurt and a strained relationship with the father he once worshipped. In 1983, Landon married Cindy, and they had 2 children, Jennifer and Sean. He now had a 3rd family, a new chapter. But the shadows of the past remained. He had built an empire on family values, yet his own life had strayed far from the script. The man who preached loyalty on screen had made choices that caused deep pain in his own family. That contradiction hinted at deeper complexities churning just beneath the surface, ones rooted in a past far darker than most of his fans ever knew. To really understand Michael Landon, the driven artist, the complicated father, the star who chased perfection, you have to understand the boy he once was. For years, there were just whispers about his difficult childhood. But now, decades after his death, his own children, especially his daughter Cheryl, are confirming the brutal trauma he survived. It's a story of abuse and fear that changes everything we thought we knew about him. His daughter Cheryl has talked about what she called one of the most abusive childhoods she had ever heard of. The source of that trauma was his mother, Peggy O'Neill. She wasn't a nurturing parent, she was a deeply unstable woman who put her son through unimaginable psychological cruelty. She frequently staged suicide attempts, often right in front of her young son. In one terrifying incident Landon himself later shared, his mother tried to drown herself during a family beach vacation. Michael, just a boy, had to rescue her. He said that moments after he pulled her from the water, she acted like nothing had happened, while he was so overwhelmed with fear that he threw up. He called it the worst experience of his life. This constant fear of his mother dying, or of failing to save her, created a storm of anxiety for young Eugene. One of the most humiliating results was that he battled chronic bedwetting well into his teens. His mother turned this private struggle into a public shame. In an act of shocking cruelty, she would hang his soiled sheets out his bedroom window for the whole neighborhood to see. He lived in a state of constant dread, racing home from school to try and take the sheets down before anyone saw. He would later channel this painful experience into his work, writing and directing a semi-autobiographical movie called The Loneliest Runner, about a young bedwetter who finds escape in long-distance running. His home life was a landscape of fear. His parents' constant fighting and his mother's instability cast a dark shadow over everything. His daughter Cheryl believes this is the key to understanding his life's work. She once said, "I always think of my dad as a little boy who was never quite loved enough, so he went around creating love for others." His TV shows, with their loving families and strong fathers, weren't just fiction, they were his therapy. They were the world he wished he had and the family he was desperate to create, both on screen and off. This hidden trauma also explains his relentless drive and his famous need for control on set. After growing up in chaos, he tried to create order and perfection in his professional life. He needed things to be good and safe in a way his own childhood never was. He turned his pain into fuel, a force that pushed him to become one of the most successful people in television history. The wholesome image wasn't a lie, but it was armor, built to protect the wounded boy who was always there, just beneath the surface. And it's that wounded boy who is at the center of the complicated memories his daughters are now sharing. For over 3 decades, we've held on to the image of Michael Landon as Charles Ingalls or Little Joe. But for the women who called him Dad, the picture is a mosaic of light and shadow, of deep love and deep pain. As they break their silence, Landon's daughters are telling their own stories, revealing a man far more complex, flawed, and fascinating than his public persona ever let on. For Cheryl Landon, Michael wasn't just a father, he was a savior. He came into her life when she was 6, after he married her mother, Lynn. Before Michael, Cheryl's childhood had been marked by trauma and abuse. She was a wounded child, and in Michael, who carried his own childhood scars, she found a kindred spirit and a fierce protector. She remembers how he instantly saw her pain because he had lived it himself. He swept into her life and, as she puts it, made me a princess. She said, "He loved me when I couldn't love myself." That powerful bond was tested in 1973. At 19, Cheryl was in a horrific car crash that killed 3 other people. She was the only survivor but had catastrophic injuries. She lay in a coma for days, and doctors gave her little hope. Michael stopped everything. He was just launching Little House on the Prairie, the biggest project of his career, but he put it on hold for a month to be by her bedside. Day after day, he sat with her, talked to her, and refused to give up. He would plead, "Fight baby. Fight baby," even as nurses told him she couldn't hear him. Cheryl says that during her coma, she had a spiritual experience and didn't want to come back, but it was her father's voice that pulled her back to life. It was during this time that Michael Landon made a secret promise to God: if Cheryl's life was spared, he would dedicate his work to creating television that would help people. Cheryl didn't even know about this promise until she saw it in his final interview with Life magazine, at the foot of his deathbed. When she asked him about it, he squeezed her hand and said, "We don't know how to love each other, we've forgotten." That promise became the driving force behind Highway to Heaven. For Cheryl, her father's love literally saved her life. She calls him the prime force in my life, the rock who helped her heal. Her work as a motivational speaker and author was born from that promise and the incredible love he showed her. Leslie Landon Matthews, who acted on Little House on the Prairie, remembers a father who was larger than life, a man she and her siblings saw as a Superman. But looking back now, her memories are touched with a sad sense of foreshadowing. She talks about a father whose incredible drive came at a terrible price. Leslie has been open about her father's stubbornness, especially about his own health. She describes a man who was always burning the candle at both ends, constantly working. But in the process, she says, his own health got put on the back burner. He ignored symptoms, hoping they'd just go away. Getting him to a doctor was always a fight. This neglect went on until the pain was too much to ignore. In the spring of 1991, on a ski trip in Utah, Landon began suffering from severe abdominal pain. He flew home to a doctor, and the diagnosis was swift and brutal: inoperable pancreatic cancer. The world was stunned. How could this man, who seemed so strong and healthy, be so sick? Leslie now thinks about this with a daughter's heartbreak. "I think if my dad was alive today, he would say, 'Boy, I blew it,'" she admitted. "I really should have been staying on top of my health." She gets why he didn't. As a caretaker, it's easy to let your own well-being slide. But that doesn't change the painful fact that his stubbornness may have cost him precious time. This experience changed all of his children. Leslie says that because of what happened to their father, they all do the opposite. They are proactive about their health. Her brother Christopher's recent scare with a kidney tumor, caught early, is proof of the life-saving lesson they learned from their fathers. Tragic mistake for Jennifer and Sean Landon, his youngest children. The memories are different. They were only 7 and 4 when their father died, so they remember Pops, not a Hollywood mogul. Their stories give us a glimpse of the playful, loving father he was in his final years. Jennifer Landon, now an actress on Yellowstone, shared a story that shows his mischievous spirit. On a family vacation in Colorado, she woke up in the middle of the night to a magical surprise. Her dad led her outside to a yard covered in fresh snow and revealed he had covered the whole area in strawberry quick powder. He handed her a spoon and let her eat as much pink snow as she wanted. "That's only one of the many, many awesome memories I have of him," she said. "He loved to create adventure for us kids." Sean, his youngest, remembers similar fun. He recalled his dad taking him on errands and buying him marshmallows and candy, treats their health-conscious mom forbid. He'd say, "Now, don't tell your mother." Sean remembered, adding that, of course, the first thing he'd do is go tell her. For Sean, his dad was just the most fun guy imaginable. Jennifer also remembers a father who, despite her age, treated her like an equal. He talked to her like an adult and watched the serious film My Left Foot with her when she was only 6. But their time was cut short. Jennifer knew when her father got sick, and his death, she says, fundamentally changed her. Even in his final weeks, Landon focused on his youngest kids. He started a new bedtime ritual where they could each ask him one question. 4-year-old Sean always asked the same thing: "What was the worst thing you did when you were a little boy?" But 7-year-old Jennifer asked the hard questions. One night, she asked him if he was going to die. Landon was honest. He told her he didn't know, but that even if he did, she and her brother would be okay. "They would miss me terribly, and I would miss them terribly," he told her. But nothing would change. For a man who spent decades building an image of perfect harmony, Michael Landon's final years were a painful unraveling. The facade began to crack under the pressure of public scandal and private heartbreak, ending with a devastating illness that brought his family and the world to its knees. And even after he was gone, the drama wasn't over. The first major blow was the affair with Cindy Clerico and his divorce from Lynn No. It wasn't just a private matter, it felt like a public betrayal of the values he preached on Little House. The fallout was huge. Friends took sides, and his relationship with some of his older children became deeply strained. His son, Michael Jr., has talked about turning to substance abuse to cope with the pain of his parents' divorce, a time when his whole world fell apart. While he and his father eventually reconciled, the scars from that period ran deep. Then, in April 1991, the news broke: Michael Landon had inoperable pancreatic cancer.